36. And in December this year, we'll be celebrating 190th Foundation Day. So for a chamber which has been there for so many years, DEI is a fairly new concept, as has been for a lot of companies who participated with us. But in the last 7-8 years, the chamber has been very, very dedicated to this area. I mean, you can imagine in 189 years of our operation, 186 of our presidents were males, only 3 have been women, and that's also in the past 5 years. So all 3 have been in the past 5 years. And Bombay Chamber is today headed by a lot of our organizations, a lot of our committees which run our programs. A lot of them are headed by very, very capable women. And some of what we do continuously is because of so much of contribution which comes from them. I am extremely thankful to all of you who have joined us at 3 o'clock today. Of course, the awards are going to be later in the evening, but to all the mentors who spared time, and I was speaking to some of the mentees and they were very, very happy that they got so much of knowledge from what each one of you were able to dedicate. So many thanks to all of you for sparing your time. And to all the mentees, I'm sure there's a lot which you would have learned. And Bombay Chamber will keep on doing a lot of work in this area so that we can work as much as possible to get not only training of different kinds, but also the concept of DEI, although in some part of the world this is no longer as important as most of us think it is. But most of our companies, most of our boards, I would say all of our board is very, very keen with the agenda of D&I at all their workplaces. So thank you all once again for being here. And I'm thankful for our partners, Deloitte, for being with us for the second year in a row. And with them, we've been able to do a lot. We've actually progressed from where we were last year. So thank you, Deloitte team, and may I request the Deloitte team to take it up from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khosla. It's been a pleasure hearing the journey that Bombay Chamber has undertaken, and it's been a pleasure also for Deloitte to be partners in this progress. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the Bombay Chamber DEI Forum and Awards 2025. Honestly, to see this room full of leaders, thinkers, practitioners together in one space, choosing to have a conversation really says a lot. I'm Manveen, and I go with the pronouns she, her.
And I am Nikita. I also go by the pronouns she, her, and we are your hosts for today.
We all know the world is shifting, and we also know inclusion doesn't happen by accident. It happens when we start paying attention with a lot of intention. Interestingly, this morning, on our way here, Nikita and I, we found ourselves noticing things we might have otherwise overlooked. You know how sometimes people count red cars or yellow taxis or numbers? I do that a lot. We started counting, small moments of exclusion, the everyday architecture that quietly tells someone you weren't really thought of. We had a couple of examples, so, like the rows of shops in the basement level, shiny and new, spotless, but we didn't really find ways for people, with disabilities, let's say, for instance, to really get to those spaces. Or a woman, in fact, trying to park her car, being asked by the parking attendant to get out of the car so that he could do it for her. Now, we understand these aren't always intentional, but they're quite telling.
And just when we were counting the gaps, we saw something else. We saw a Swiggy rider being called by their name, not as bhaiya, not as delivery wala, but being addressed by their name. And then we saw another woman, a woman security guard, asking for ID from visitors, and very boldly and very passionately. These are small moments too. And these are signals that something else is also happening, that there is change that's evident in places. Maybe not everywhere, maybe not very large, but it's happening. And today is all about that, spotlighting stories of progress.
and indeed spotlighting your story. So thank you very much for being here. Once again, welcome to all of you present here. Deloitte is very honored to partner with Bombay Chamber for the second time in a row as a knowledge partner for the DEI Awards. And to officially open our forum, may I take the pleasure of inviting Nikhil Kolur, partner, Human Capital Consulting, Deloitte, India.
So good afternoon, everyone. First of all, as Nikita and Manveen shared, a real privilege, real honor for the last 2 years to be associated with the Bombay Chambers to partner on this very, very important topic for the country. And that's really my starting thought, when I was just trying to pen some thoughts on why are we coming together, right? What's the reason for us to come together? The starting thought really was to look at research that we've done globally and in India over the last year, to just look at how spends and budgets on DEI have shifted, right? I think we can all talk about commitments and actions, but really when it comes to commitment, it's about budget and money at the end of the day, right? So we saw, of course, as you're all aware, some disturbing trends globally. And this also is augmented by some of the conversations, for example, I've been having with a few boards, a few CEOs, where DI has definitely taken a bit of a backseat in terms of the intensity and focus of conversations. A lot of it, of course, has come because of what's happening in the US and in some of the Western countries. That's where it's triggered. And a good to do is no longer a good to do, right? That's how they're seeing, unfortunately. The flip side to this, which is the positive story, which is I think the endearing story for all of us, is in our country, spends have increased by 70%, right? So globally, you're seeing probably a 10-15% dip in commitment, financial, monetary commitment to the DEI agenda that every organization has. India, we saw a 70% increase over the last year, right? So definitely a dichotomy, a very, very happy dichotomy to report, right up the outset. The challenge, however, is when we say 70%, we're still talking about corporates, we're talking about organizations. Any yardstick guess, when we say that coverage is happening, what percentage of the working population do we actually cover through those formal mechanisms or budgets? Any broad guesses? I know it's a post-lunch session, it's gloomy in Bombay, but let's try to have a conversation. Any guesses? 25 to 30%? Yeah, I think that's a little more higher, on the higher side, but the realistic figure is about 18%, right? That's it. Whatever we're saying, we are doing in our organizations, it's only covering 18% of the working population of the country. Out of 1.4 billion, we have 490 million who essentially are working in the unorganized sector, who don't have a voice, who essentially are farming, they're a carpenter, they're a plumber, whatever job, right, that you can attribute to the unorganized sector. But they have no formal social security coverage. So the reason I'm just bringing this up is we've obviously taken some good strides in the past few years, but the job is probably 10% done. And I know I started with a positive thought in terms of spends and budgets, but a sobering coverage point as well, right? The other trend that we've seen, which I felt was very relevant for our conversation today, before we kind of move to the awards section post-evening, is how do we actually embed inclusion, right? We all talk about the programs that we're running, the initiatives that we're running. We speak about segmented programs, right? And we will see some of those segmented programs being rewarded also in the evening, right? You would have seen the different categories of awards. But what we've realized, and this is again more of a realization based on some research, is leaders who said they are inclusive, or at least they have been perceived to be inclusive, right, are leaders who have embedded this in their ways of working, right? To the point that it's almost unconscious, right? While we talk about unconscious bias and all of that, I think the positive flip side to that is leadership perspective is how do you embed this? And that's really what I wanted to close with. I don't think inclusion is about a set of policies alone. That's the organization commitment, that's the organization way of recognizing strategies. But at an individual level, n equal to 1 level, when you look at yourself, I think really real question is, how much of it have you been able to make muscle memory? And through today's conversations, we hope that we'll help you flex some of that. We ourselves are at nascent stages. I think that's a good place to probably just acknowledge, right? And through some of the conversations that we've lined up today, we'll hear from past winners, right? So we'll hear from companies who have been awarded and obviously have demonstrated success and speak about what we call best practices, right, in a way. That's one aspect. The second, which is more of an evening agenda, is we'll hear from some leaders again. And I'm looking forward to some questions being thrown at them. So we'll, of course, have some space and time for that. But most importantly, I think just think about, how do you make it muscle memory, unconscious action, day-to-day behaviors, all those examples that Manveen and Nikita spoke about, very endearing examples, right? Positive and negative. So that's my urge, that's my request to kind of just set the tone. Really looking forward to spending the next 4-5 hours with all of you. And again, thank you, Sandeep. Thank you to the entire Bombay Chambers team. Just one closing thought. I know Meenakshi is, who is essentially our counterpart when we run the awards. We've been thinking about really the credibility of these awards, right? And I just wanted to close on that. Take it with a pinch of salt. But I'm sure you'll see that DEI awards are dime a dozen these days. You will see by design there is no media logo here. We could have got someone else, I'm sure, if we wanted to, but that's by design. Because we believe that practices, submissions, nominations, the entire process has to be really as credible as possible. So while we might not maybe be the largest award in this category in the country, I genuinely, hand to heart, believe we are the most credible. So thank you again for being part of this, and look forward to the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikhil, for sharing those facts on how DEI is evolving globally. Definitely something to think about. You've not only set tone for the day, but also reminded us that these conversations matter at every level of leadership. So now we start with our first session of the day, which is an activity called the Exchanges of Successes and Struggles. So this segment is basically designed to take us beyond theory and into real-life practices. We'll hear from different organizations that we have here with us today, who have not only walked the talk of DEI, but have also been recognized for their initiatives. They'll share what has worked for them, what is something that has not worked for them, and they are continuously evolving to build better workplaces. So to begin, we'll welcome our first organization, the first presenting organization, Shell.
Very good afternoon, warm welcome, and I'm sure the tone has already been set by the leaders here. What I would do is just start with a video to keep you going and get engaged. This is one of the videos that we have created for the silent ships that's very much known in the fuel stations, if you follow them through closely. So just give a glimpse to that, and then we talk about a little bit how Shell is bringing this alive on ground. So thank you so much. And I know it's a very powerful video. Every time I see it, I have myself goosebumps, and I really feel if I go there and visit it, the chaos and the calmness would be felt together at the same moment, at the same time. But before I go there, I just want to share what's Shell's commitment at the global level. We are very clear that we want to bring one of the most diverse and inclusive organization, and we believe in our strategy statement, which clearly talks about powering together, powering lives together. And I personally believe that these initiatives that I'm going to talk about is going to be more about, when you talk about, for example, disability or special abilities as we call, it's about infrastructure, inclusion. When we talk about gender, we want to talk about care, how care elements are very important. When we talk about LGBTQ community, we actually talk about protection, how we create protection mechanisms for them to live and be felt inclusive. And we talk about this generation, which is actually multi-generational workforce that we work with. It's about how you communicate and how you create that opportunities for communication, right? With that, I'll move to the next slide. I hope it's visible. Yeah. So you saw the silent shift, right? I want to say, I will not talk about what the video talks about, but basically, the biggest challenge that we faced when we were creating that back in 2022 in Pune, the element was how do you convert all sound cues into visual cues? Because the shift is entirely run by people with special ability, with speech and hearing impairment. So technically, you have to convert every cue into visual cue. So for example, the biggest risk in running a petrol pump is essentially saying, hey, if tomorrow there is a risk, how do you identify that? If there is an emergency, how do you do it? In a normal setup, you'll always hear these fire bells, right? But for them, we created visual cues like emergency lights. Every conversation that's happening is through cues, through cards. So the risk is that, yes, of course, there is a risk, but the element is that we are very clear that we will continue to embed that, and that's why we replicated those into 3 cities right now. If you happen to go to Pune, Bangalore, Hubli, please do experience them. You'll feel the difference there. That's one initiative, and the biggest challenge there is, again, creating that inclusion, creating that belongingness, and the feeling of belongingness is very important. And that's why these initiatives are not just Shell HR initiatives, as we call. These are actually driven directly by business. And it's business who's saying that we will not just internalize DEI in the organization, but how do we bring it to the larger organization and the larger context in the society that we live in, right? With that, I'll move, and that also, it's just not about about people with special ability. We also have Women Shift, which is completely run by women staff, and that makes me move to the next segment, which is about moving beyond the binary, right? So I'm sure you've heard about Twin. I don't know how many of you've heard. There is something called Together We Win, and these are networks that operate in Shell, which have senior leadership, senior women leadership, you have LGBTQ communities, you have Young Shell India, which I'll talk about as well. Some of these networks exist. But whenever these conversations happen, they're more towards these set of communities. So men in the room always feel, while we are your ally, how are you supporting? Because in India context, there is stereotyping, which exists and embedded in the society. Like simple things, like gender roles. It's very clear. Maternal is mother will take care of the child, right? But in reality, that's not true. We are living in a world which is dual and which needs dual support and is support in every way. So how do we do that? In one of the International Men's Day, actually somebody came back and said, you're not doing anything for us. So what's the way how we do it? So last year onwards, we started something called shoulder to shoulder tap conversations, more about men and their issues. And it's very clear that we do not only open this forums to only women or only men. It's open to all genders. And that's where we say that we will have conversations about things like, you talk about cancer, you talk about parental support, paternal needs, you talk about financial wisdom, and there's sessions like wisdom wallet and stuff like that we do for our people, where we clearly say, how do these people come together, talk about their issues, and bring that into culture and practice at some point in time. That's how we do about this. And recently we introduced something called paternal leave. You'll be very surprised. The way we have introduced it, it's a global policy which says 8 weeks of paternal leave standard given to all staff, all male staff, right? Or same-sex staff as well. In those cases, families have come back and say, what are you going to take 8 weeks leaves for? Because that's to be done by the mother. So the families are also surprised. They're pleasantly surprised, but there are reactions like these as well come. And that's truth. That in a society where it's clearly seen that father is the person who takes the role, mother is the person who leads the role, then how does father operates, right? So those were the things that we felt clearly was one of our areas that we started with shoulder to shoulder, and this is now really run clearly by men and women together in the same room. Now that we've spoken about networks, I really want to talk about another initiative that Shell has done, and it's been running quite well. In fact, for quite few years, but taken a different shape altogether, which is called Generation Blend. Basically, when we started, we said, how do you integrate young, fresh graduates, freshers who come into the organization, and how do you integrate in such a global organization which is matrixed as well as difficult to navigate, sometimes we say. So how do you bring those together in the same room, same floor forums? So what we did was there was something called Young Shell Network, which we started with, which essentially says young, but in reality, we have multi-generational teams working in the segment to support those conversations. So, for example, when a young person comes, the way they see office, for them, offices is, yes, I can do virtual role. Why do you need to come office? But if you talk about a traditional yesteryear, some of us would say, no, office is a must. You should physically come. So those conversations come to life, and when they come to life, then technically you can build those elements into your policies because you get those feedbacks live from the forums. And one thing that keeps going these forums is essentially say, hey, how do these networks run on their own? Because there's no HR policy around it. There's no policy around it. It's just the leaders who promote these conversations, ensure these networks exist, and volunteers partner themselves. And what do they get in return? Like most of us will say, why volunteers want to do this? So it's basically having them to develop their own social skills, professional skills, getting an opportunity to work with a very senior leader, which in their day-to-day jobs probably they'll not get. So why not have these forums where they can work about their passions and also deliver to the organization in a way that we want and make it more inclusive and integrated. With that, I move to the next element, which is my last but not the least story. When we talk about passion, while we can have a lot of passionate people in the room, we can have a lot of passion within ourselves to deliver, but you need infrastructure. You need policies which will imbibe some of this, right? While if I want to do something and I know that this is not allowed, but if it's in the policy, nobody can say, hey, it's an exception. It's a default that comes into the policies. So some of our policies are very clearly defined towards LGBTQ communities, things like inclusive insurance, things like inclusive relocation, things like talking about gender reassignment. Some of these are very, very clearly indicated with an intent to say this is for the LGBTQ communities. But apart from that, it's also in our organization. For example, trust-based sick leaves. How many of you would have heard that sick leaves is unlimited, right? You don't have to say, as long as you are very sure that this is the reason that you have taken a sick leave. Nobody will question. Things like those have been embedded through trust, through continuity, through behaviors and values that we believe in, and we'll trust the individual who's coming into the organization. So these are some of the things which we have built in. We also talk about gender pay equity. We talk about inclusion in terms of all the policies, and it's not a one-day journey. It's obviously parts and parcels, right? So when you review policies and processes, you actually see, are the words really gender agnostic? Are they really telling the way it has to be felt by the individual, and individuals can be varied. So those elements are really looked through end to end. With that, I will move to the last piece. And now that I have spoken about so many other elements, you would have recognized that it's the commitment at a leadership level that continues. We have very clear data matrix that we really record for it. accountability is not left to only leader on the top, but it's also left to the line manager level. We have education and trainings. I heard somebody speaking about unconscious bias. So it's a mandatory training for any individual who joins Shell, right? So you have to really go through it, and it's a reminder that keeps going till the time you've completed it, and there are refreshers run on that. Similarly, inclusive values, policies and practices that I shared that exist in the organization. In the end, I would like to just say how we always talk in our regular conversations is we always say, if you choose to work for Shell, you choose to subscribe to DEI. There is no exception on that. With that, I'll close and move to the next panelist.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think Shell is definitely clearly walking the walk, on paper and in person as well. I am definitely going to go to one of the silent shifts when I'm in Bangalore. And I think we should all be excited because we'll have the chairperson, Mansi Tripathi, with us later today. So definitely, if anybody is interested, we could all catch up.